Batman the Animated Series is often remembered as a bold, dark and surprisingly grown-up show. But here's the part people often forget. There were a lot of rules imposed on it. For all its shadows and sorrow, BTAS was still a children's program, and that meant that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted. Every script, storyboard and animation cell passed through a set of broadcast standards defined by one question. What if a child copies this? This meant that every raised fist and shattered pane of glass had to justify its existence. As I outlined in one of my earliest videos on this channel, the big rules, as defined by this drawing by Bruce Timm, were no strangulation, no smashing through windows, no realistic guns, no smoking, no drugs, no overt child endangerment, no religion, and absolutely no nudity. The show may be grim, but it needed to be modest. On paper, that sounds suffocating, like trying to tell a crime story with oven mitts on. If you're instinctively bristling at the idea of censorship, that's completely understandable. Artists don't always do their best work when someone's standing behind them with a red pen and a list of absolute no-nos. But in this case, I argued that it led to some significantly more creative decisions. For instance, they couldn't show the Graysons falling to their deaths, so instead they showed the couple swing out of the shot, and we heard the crowd gasp with the frayed rope swinging back into frame. When you're not allowed to show violence, you have to suggest it, and the emotional impact is huge because we picture what happened in our minds. Similarly, when you can't endanger a child outright, you have to explore why that child would walk into danger on their own. This is perfectly demonstrated in an early, often overlooked episode, Be a Clown. This is the story of Jordan Hill, son of Mayor Hamilton Hill, running away from home and joining a performer because he wants to learn to be a magician, and it turns out that this performer is really the Joker. Now, originally Bruce Timm had come up with an idea about a child being so afraid of Batman that he refused to accept his help, and Batman has to figure out how to save him. This is still seen in the episode's climax, but it's less central to the story. Note that a similar idea is revisited in the final episode of Batman Beyond, Unmasked. So far, so good, but originally Jordan Hill was meant to be kidnapped. The Joker infiltrates the mayor's mansion, snatches the child and vanishes into the night. It's an act of clean, simple, classic villainy. But the censors said no. Child abduction was a line the show couldn't cross, especially not in a program airing after school. You can't traumatize children by making them think that an evil clown might come to their birthday party and drag them away. So the story changed. Jordan doesn't get taken. Instead, he has a massive argument with his father and runs away. And that single alteration transforms the episode because when a child is kidnapped, the villain is purely external. A monster breaks in and snatches the kid, so the hero has to restore order. It's dramatic, but it's straightforward. However, when a child chooses to leave, the problem is no longer just the villain, it's the home. Jordan willingly leaves and stows away in Joker's van, and I should be clear that nobody knows that this birthday performer is the Joker because he's disguised as a clown. Genius. And plans to blow up the guests because Hamilton Hill had compared him to Batman. But the Joker really gets into this role as a birthday clown, performing tricks, earning applause, and even gives Jordan some advice on how to become a better magician. Find someone better than you and steal their act. As such, when Jordan runs away because his overbearing father cares more about his personal image than his son's happiness, he seeks out the clown. And this is because the Joker had validated him and encouraged his interests. He offered attention when his father demanded photo opportunities with performative parenthood. It shifts the story away from a physical threat and towards emotional neglect. The danger is both the Joker's evil and Jordan's vulnerability. The censorship may have removed the kidnapping, but what was left behind was a story about a boy who wants to be seen and a villain who sees him first. And I think that in some ways, that's a lot more relatable and realistic for a portion of the audience. And speaking of Mayor Hill, censorship also had its part in his character too. In the comics, Mayor Hamilton Hill is corrupt and self-serving, a stooge for Rupert Thorne. But that version doesn't make it into the animated series because one of the undocumented no-nos was that they couldn't undermine the authorities by making them corrupt. One corrupt cop was acceptable, but everyone else had to be clean. In Be a Clown, Hill isn't crooked. He's ineffective. The episode opens with him announcing the construction of new homes aimed to make a troubled neighborhood better and safer. This is crashed by armed crooks trying to escape from Batman, and Hill is left embarrassed. The next day is his son's birthday party, which doubles as a media event. Most of the guests are his friends, or people he wished were his friends, and their children. Jordan doesn't really know anyone. By stripping away political corruption, the episode narrows its focus to Hill as a distracted parent. The main problem is that he doesn't support his son and tries to dissuade him from following his dream of being a magician. And it dovetails perfectly with the change from kidnapping to runaway. The story stops being about a mayor who can't protect the city and instead becomes about a father who can't protect his own home, which incidentally is exactly what enrages the Joker in the first place. Hill boasts that under his leadership, Gotham will be as safe as his mansion. The Joker hears that and decides to test that theory by walking straight through the front door and exposing the emotional fault line that's already there. And it sets the stage for how dangerous this early version of the Joker is willing to be, even with the broadcast leash firmly attached. I've made no secret that I'm not really a fan of the early Joker episodes like Christmas with the Joker or The Last Laugh, which took place before they had found their take on the character. But where those two episodes leaned a little too heavily on the goofy side for my tastes, I quite like how menacing Joker is in this episode. A lot of that is down to Mark Hamill's performance and how he switches from a jovial tone to a more aggressive growl in the same sentence. But the writing is solid here too. Take, for instance, the scene where he encourages Jordan to try the sword-swallowing trick. You can practically hear the censors speaking through Jordan as he says he won't try it because he could get cut. Of course, it's a trick sword that retracts. There was never any real danger, but he didn't tell Jordan that. Likewise, his patented Joker flower was pruned by the censors. Originally it was supposed to spray acid, but they deemed that to be too dangerous, so it was changed to gas, which is still really horrible, just horrible in a different way. Every prop and trap is sanitized enough to pass the censors, but the Joker's intent is crystal clear. He's vindictive, manipulative, and remorseless. Even with censorship's impact on the story, there was another invisible hand guiding Be a Clown, the creative leadership behind the scenes. Director Frank Parr has said the storyboard team struggled with the style of the show early on. They didn't always get what the producers were trying to achieve. Too many of them thought they were just working on a run-of-the-mill cartoon. In practical terms, that meant scenes weren't landing, pacing may have felt off, and the tension risked slipping into slapstick. That's when Bruce Timm stepped in, essentially taking over the second act. The tension of Batman racing to deal with the exploding birthday cake, the humour in Bullock helping himself to a slice of cake in the background, and Jordan's expressions as he participates in Joker's plan to capture Batman. It's all great stuff. At this point in production, the show was still finding its way, and with hindsight, you can see that in Be a Clown. The rules of censorship forced the writers to focus on implication and character, while the creative leadership ensured the episode never lost momentum or clarity, even though the episode was handed over to the weakest animation studio, ACOM. So yes, the end result is an uneven episode, but one that still feels purposeful. You can see the series navigating the hurdles, testing its voice, and in the process, discovering how far it can push tension, menace, and emotional impact without ever showing a body hitting the ground. In short, Be a Clown is messy, but it's also a great example of how the show found its rhythm in real time and how it was shaped as much by rules as by any artist's vision. The episode captures a moment when Batman the Animated Series was learning its language. Censorship forced the story to focus on implication. The Joker's menace couldn't rely on overtly deadly weapons, so it came through in character, intent, and psychological tension. Similarly, Jordan's dangerous escapade turned a simple plot into an exploration of neglect, vulnerability, and manipulation. And Hill's failure wasn't political corruption, it was the very personal failure of a father who couldn't see his own son. And I think that actually makes him a more interesting character than his comic book counterpart. The hurdles that might have sunk a lesser show instead became a lesson in storytelling, that limits can spark innovation, that rules can help heighten tension, and that pushing against constraints is how a series discovers its voice. It's not the definitive Joker episode, nor even close to the series' best, but I argue that it is a vital step in BTAS's development. It perfectly demonstrates how rules can force the artists and writers to find menace, drama, and emotional weight in places they might never have looked otherwise. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love and loss. Plus an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. When I return on Friday, I'll be going back to my latest The Batman Villain Poll to discuss an obscure 90s supervillain from the comics that was dramatically reimagined for the show. Yes, it is time to talk about Gearhead. And next Monday, I want to return to the streets of Neo Gotham to talk about an unusual episode of Batman Beyond, but one that struck a chord with me about love and betrayal. Let's discuss April Moon. Hope to see you then.